Hey folks, it's Andrew from Gemba Red, and today we'll be going over 4 internet doctors that recommend high intensity for red light therapy. Now remember, I'm just a red light therapy manufacturer. I'm not affiliated with any of these doctors. I'm just presenting to you their opinions so you can get both sides of the equation. And of course, I'll be expressing my own commentary, opinions, and research into what they're saying. But you don't need to take what I say. Obviously, I'm just a chemical engineer, and all these people are doctors, so they outrank me. And of course, we're going to follow fair use here on the channel, which seems like a tough concept for influencers to understand. So we're going to put these citations on the screen, and there will be links in the description below so you can follow those doctors and you can watch the full context of those videos. So anyway, let's get into it with one of our favorites, Dr. Andrew Huberman.
But this new study suggests that one of the more powerful things is this 850 nanometer light that comes from sunlight. Yes, you can recapitulate this with an artificial source, like a pure 850 nanometer artificial light source, but most people don't have that or have access to it. And no, you're not going to find it in just a pure red light device. You would need one that also makes 850 nanometer light at high intensity.
So you say you need 850 nanometer light at high intensity, according to Andrew Huberman. And he's kind of talking funny, like 850 nanometers is like hard to obtain, even though it's like one of the most common wavelengths in the entire industry. And more important, with Andrew Huberman, what does high intensity really mean? What does it mean? 10, 50, 100, 200 milliwatts per centimeter squared? I don't know. And if you follow Andrew Huberman, then you know he's got all these oddly specific protocols for other things like sauna therapy, what temperature ranges to use, how long to use them, how often to use them, and different protocols for different conditions with sauna. And same thing for cold plunges, different temperatures, how long and how often. But for red light therapy, he doesn't have any of his famous protocols. And the real kicker is, with Andrew Huberman on this specific reel, he was referring to Glenn Jeffrey's recent paper that used 850 nanometer light at about 9 milliwatts per centimeter squared. Literally, Andrew Huberman was referencing that brand new paper specifically. So it's kind of misconstruing the science that he says you really need high intensity, and he doesn't even define what that is, when he's literally referring to a paper that used 9 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So again, this is why it's so hard for me to try to follow people that promote high intensities, because one, they're too vague, and two, a lot of times they're referring to things that are contradictory, that they're actually low intensity, and you get great results. And three, they don't provide any evidence for what high intensity means or what they're promoting. So anyway, we're going to see a similar pattern with Dr. Paul Anderson.
And then on the power side, usually they list the power by milliwatts per square centimeter. And the bottom line is you want the milliwatts per square centimeter to at least be in the triple digits, so 100 plus milliwatt per square centimeter. You don't want something that's coming out in single or double digits, which sometimes you don't see that much anymore, but sometimes you will. So look at the milliwatts per square centimeter output, and you don't want it below a 3-digit number, so 100 plus, and then you're going to be getting enough power.
Okay, so Dr. Paul Anderson recommends triple digit intensity in milliwatts per centimeter squared. That's a pretty huge range, first of all, from 100 up to 999. So again, we see very, very vaguely defined ranges for what high intensity means, or you always need to be above 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared, or you need to be between 100 and 1000 milliwatts per centimeter squared. And so, where is that even coming from? So even though these guys are professional internet doctors, we should still be asking them for evidence behind their claims. So I don't judge people based on their credentials. I don't care if you're a doctor or just a standard influencer. If you bring the evidence, then I'll listen to you. If you don't have evidence, then I can't do anything with it. So again, I would just politely ask Dr. Paul Anderson and some of these other doctors of where are you getting this range? Show me a publication that says you need 100 to 999 milliwatts per centimeter squared. Because listen, I can easily find 5 or more studies that say you always need to be below 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared. And like I said, this next part from Dr. Paul Anderson is even better. Again, it mirrors what Andrew Huberman did.
And there started to come out some studies and some papers about red near infrared therapy for the lung and heart inflammation of acute COVID and then post-COVID. And what they showed in the hospital experiments, where they had people put a vest on so they couldn't tell if it was turned on or not, and they took people in the hospital with very bad COVID symptoms, and half got the treatment with it turned on, half put the vest on and it wasn't turned on. The group who got the treatment had lower amounts of inflammatory cytokine markers and had better outcomes and had more propensity for getting out of the hospital with bad COVID, especially with their earlier variants.
So again, this would be great if he actually provided the studies, the citation, the PMI number, the link, or anything. That would really help me to figure out what he's talking about and what are the parameters that study he's referring to used. Now, I'm pretty sure the study he's describing is this one here, because he was describing using like a vest-like device that was flipped on for the treatment group and was turned off for the placebo group. Now, the people in the treatment group didn't feel any heat, because it's not normal to feel heat with red light therapy, and that's how you can have good quality data that's a true placebo, because you don't feel any heat, you don't see the light because it's invisible, so you can have really good quality data with low level light therapy because it's non-thermal, you don't feel anything. But anyway, you can see this picture. This picture is from the study itself. It's exactly what he described, was kind of a wrap that wraps around your torso. And again, this is why even for internet doctors, it's helpful to fact check yourself before you present this kind of data, because this study specifically says that the power density was 2.9 milliwatts per centimeter squared. That's right, it was single digit. So if people don't want me to like attack people or criticize people or just point out the obvious, it's like, make sure you bring your evidence to the table and double check your evidence before you present it to tens of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people, you know? So yes, this is a single digit intensity number, 2.9, that he was referring to in the same video that he was saying you need at least 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So there's a pretty big discrepancy between what he's claiming, again, that didn't have any evidence, and the one study he did refer to was only 2.9. It was only single digit. So again, I'm trying my hardest to cherry pick some doctors that promote high intensities, but again, I would just love to see the evidence. I'm not trying, I'm just an engineer. This is what I do. I look into evidence, I fact check, I validate things. I used to get paid a lot of money to do this kind of work. And, in this industry, people don't really appreciate that, except for when they're stealing it and then adding it to their own content. Okay, so the next one we're going to try to breeze through pretty quickly is Dr. Amir. He seems to be like a dermatologist or a skincare expert, and he's talking about LED light therapy for your face, more specifically like the masks.
You're going to decide if you have the time in the day. It's probably pretty relaxing to put a little mask on, just kind of be mindful. You can't check your phone during that time, etc. It could be a nice little thing to do. But here is the catch. Most at-home devices on the market are either too weak or the wrong wavelength. The key factor is irradiance. And radiance is the intensity of light hitting your skin. At the end of the day, if your device doesn't have a irradiance level of around 100 to 110, you're not getting enough intensity to make the changes happen. Otherwise, you're just kind of like sitting under a glowing light.
Okay, so Dr. Amir recommends 100 to 110 for your skincare for your face. Now this time the criteria is surprisingly narrow, from 100 to 110. That's a pretty narrow window to set up for people. And again, I would just ask, where's he getting this number? That seems like pretty high, especially for like an at-home device. Again, maybe he's biased towards clinic devices that, people can only use once or twice a week. Maybe that's okay, but for an at-home device, that's like way too much, in my opinion, as an engineer, not a doctor. So if you want to take his advice, then, you can go with God. But, I've always recommended, especially for the face, to be under 50 milliwatts per centimeter squared. I would say that you can do very well with just 5 to at most 20 milliwatts per centimeter squared, especially if you're concerned about side effects like hyperpigmentation, melasma, rosacea, things like that. You get great skincare benefits on that lower end of the range, and you're going to avoid all the problems. And again, a lot of people falsely claim that the near infrared is causing the problems on the skin, and maybe it does, but I think it's just too much intensity. If you're at the lower end of the range, you can safely use red and near infrared. Great benefits, minimized all your risks. But like I said, I'm presenting to you what doctors recommend, and they say 100 to 110 for your face. And, it's up to you. I'm just laying out all the options, trying to be as unbiased as possible, giving you my commentary, because I don't want the liability of people using 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared on their face. But, it's up to you. I'm trying to give you all the options. And so we saved the best for last is Dr. Michael recommending high-intensity LED panels.
Here's an example of where you don't necessarily need a medical grade or a more expensive device. The platinum LED, as we talked about, has a range of wavelengths, and the irradiance is about 153 milliwatts per centimeter squared. And the cost for one panel is $1,300. Now, I said it could be up to several thousand. That's if you have 4 of these panels. But nevertheless, the competitor, if you will, or one competitor, is a bed called the NovoThor. And this bed costs over $100,000, even though it has a lower irradiance. So it's not as powerful. It's going to therefore require a longer treatment time. It has a shorter series of wavelengths for in my opinion, a ridiculous cost. So just want to underscore that more expensive or medical grade does not mean better. This is just one case in point.
So here we go. We have Dr. Michael promoting a high-intensity red light therapy panel that claims to emit 153 milliwatts per centimeter squared at 12 inches away. So listen, in my opinion, that number is probably not realistic. That, we've seen this over and over again for many years, that companies are falsely inflating their intensity marketing with solar power meters, especially because it was encouraged by a popular book at the time and a popular influencer that, claims that, more power is always better. So then a lot of manufacturers had a lot of pressure to crank up the intensity of their devices and to continue to use solar power meters to stay competitive. So I'm personally very skeptical of that 153 milliwatts per centimeter squared at 12 inches away number. I would assume it's probably about half of that, which is still bonkers amount, which is what that would be like a little over 76 milliwatts per centimeter squared at 12 inches away. That is still a hefty amount of intensity, especially because he's comparing it to a clinically studied device, the NovoThor, which has been clinically studied. It's been used by Olympic athletes. It's very highly regarded in the industry as one of the top tier brands. And yes, it's very expensive, but it's also been clinically studied to be very safe and very effective. So unfortunately, Dr. Michael shares a negative experience that he had with overdosing red light therapy.
And reactive oxygen species then spikes. So if you go too far, you plummet your mitochondrial membrane potential, your ATP production, while simultaneously your reactive oxygen species go way up. And this actually happened to me. I was, on a kick of red light, and all of a sudden I started having bilateral patellar tendonitis. Both my knees were sore. And I finally pieced together that my daily total body bed application of red light was too much. And as soon as I started using the red light, exactly as we're going to outline with the dosing recommendations here in a second, 3 days per week rather than 7, those issues of joint inflammation in my knees went away. So that's exactly what you're seeing here. And again, this is a key point, because even if you follow the recommendations of the devices that we're going to cover in a second, but you use them too much, you might see inflammation in joints, or even accelerated aging or exacerbation of, rather than improvement of, fatigue.
And so this is an unfortunate occurrence that Dr. Michael, who seems pretty bright, accidentally overdosed, and he ended up with, maybe some knee pain or knee inflammation, some sort of knee issue that he's describing here. And he traced it back that he was doing it too frequently. And of course, he talks about some studies on the biphasic dose response that I've covered in my blogs years ago. And he's really implying to be talking about the cumulative dose response with red light therapy, that a single dose gives you a certain response, but if you do another one the next day, then you're stacking those effects on top of each other. And so, if you overdose one day or even 2 days in a row, you're probably fine. But if you overdose on consecutive days for many days or many weeks, that's where the cumulative dose response will catch up to you, and that's another form of the biphasic dose response. And so it's amazing that he's sharing this experience with you. He's trying to warn you about this issue, but we really should have never even gotten to this point in the first place, because there are so many failures in this medical device industry that would have had to happen in sequence in order for Dr. Michael, who seems pretty bright, to overdose himself into the point of having an adverse reaction, of getting increases in pain and inflammation. So it's not just like, oh, he was just doing it a little bit too often. No, that means the manufacturer was reckless and they made it too powerful. That means all the marketing from the manufacturer and from their affiliates and from the blogs and from the books were promoting him to do it too frequently, too high intensity, for too often. There's multiple phases, and that he wasn't even aware of the science that I've laid out multiple times in my blogs, that a lot of people put me down for, that I was just fear-mongering, that have been scraped up and used and plagiarized by other influencers at this point. And so it's all come back around that I was right all along. And so if Dr. Michael had this negative experience, then we have to be concerned about a lot of other people with this negative experience.
Something else that I will caution is that many of the device manufacturers don't seem to be adhering to what has been used in the research papers, and therefore they aren't necessarily adhering to the biphasic dose response caution or guidelines, if you will, and may recommend using a device every day, which I believe some of the facial masks and even some of the panels recommend daily use. And that does run a risk, again, of over treatment. I'll give the manufacturers a benefit of the doubt. This isn't always super obvious. We had to really dig into the research to find the data showing this biphasic dose response, partially motivated by my own experimentation of, hey, why did I start to have, a worsening of my symptoms? We had to dig in and find some of those details. So I want to make sure to share that with you so that you don't make the same mistake that I did. So again, all this to help equip you with the knowledge that there is such a thing with red light as overtreatment. And with how in vogue red light is becoming, I am growing a little bit concerned that it's going to become somewhat commonplace for people to be overdosing themselves.
And wouldn't there be some red flags with Dr. Michael of why he's recommending a device that I assumed he was using that specific device, the high intensity device, when he got his overdose? Why would you still recommend the device that you overdosed on to the general public? So I get that maybe if his followers, if they pay close attention to this video and he outlined his protocol, you can watch the whole video yourself. Maybe he's helping those followers, but a lot of people are buying this product and they're going to overdose and they're not going to get the memo. As opposed to if he was downplaying a real clinical grade device like the Novathor that he claimed was like 17 to 28 milliwatts per centimeter squared. If you dose every day 17 milliwatts per centimeter squared, whole body red light therapy, every single day for weeks and weeks and months, then you're less likely to get an overdose. So again, he was recommending a high intensity product that he overdosed on. If he was using low intensity all along, like I said, this could have been easily prevented if the real science was available to him and he wasn't bamboozled. Then if he was using low intensity all along daily, I would say he would be much less likely to have run into this issue at all, and we would have never learned about it. And so again, that's the one thing I can say is a good thing of all these influencers and all these brands are conducting human experimentation on people so we can see the real effects of overdose, because we're starting to see them. And people need to learn the hard way. Then that's it. I was trying to prevent people from learning the hard way. If you want to learn the hard way, it's your body, you know what I mean? So again, I tried to give you what you wanted. I cherry picked 4 doctors that recommend high intensity red light therapy, but again, they're either too vague, they're not providing evidence behind their claims, they're contradicting their own claims by referencing studies that actually use low intensity, or they've reported that they got overt harm from overdosing red light therapy, which is what I've been warning about for years. Thanks for tuning in.